Faculty Fellow here at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Welcome, and it's a pleasure to be here again today. It's a great privilege to be here today and speak about these issues about integrating environmental practice with issues of diversity and equity. As we saw earlier in this month in the last two previous sessions for Diverse Voices lecture series, implementing this integration between issues of equity and environmental practice often can be very contested and very controversial. Today's guest speaker will focus on the human right to water in the context of California's prolonged drinking water crisis. California is now suffering its most severe drought in recorded history. At the center of the drinking water crisis is the San Joaquin Valley. In this central region of the state, health and socioeconomic disparities have been serious and wide-ranging. Thousands of rural residents no longer have access to safe and affordable drinking water, and many of them have reported that they don't even have enough water to brush their teeth, take showers, or even flush the toilet. Intensifying the effects of the drought is historical groundwater contamination. Most of the drinking water contamination in the region is a direct result from decades of intense agriculture operations in the region of the Central Valley. Pesticides and fertilizers on farms and large dairies leach into the ground and contaminate the groundwater. Low-income immigrant and Latino communities bear the brunt of regulatory inaction. Many communities have been without reliable drinking water for decades, sometimes years. So these are key issues of environmental justice. In 2012, however, California Governor Jerry Brown signed the first in nation human right to water law. The law affirms the state's commitment to guaranteeing access to safe and affordable water to all residents within the state. Yet how such universal calls for a right to water are negotiated, understood, and implemented often really remain contested and controversial. So today we're going to understand from the speaker, Susana DeAnda, who's the co-executive director of the Community Water Center, the contested nature of the human right to water and how is it implemented at the local and regional scales. Before she comes up, I invite her to come up here. I want to give a brief background of Susana, who's an amazing community activist and advocate for the human right to water. Susana is a seasoned community organizer and has received numerous awards and recognitions, including 150 Fearless Women in the World Award by Newsweek magazine, a Women on Top Activist Award from Marie Claire magazine, and the AOL PBS three-part series titled Makers, Women Who Have Shaped America. And this year alone, President Obama has recognized Susana as one of 10 White House climate change makers and equities. And this is a picture of Susana recently, earlier this summer, at the White House receiving one of the Climate Change Equity Awards. So congratulations, Susana, for the great work you have done. Susana's professional experience includes planning and organizing positions at the Center for Race, Poverty, and Environment and County of Merced Planning Department and the Santa Barbara County Water Agency. Susana earned a BA from the University of California, Santa Barbara with a double major in environmental studies and geography. She currently serves on the Tulare Water Commission and the Board of Directors of the Tulare County United Way. So again, it's a pleasure to invite Susana DeAnda to speak about the human right to water. Let's give her a big warm of applause.
Thank you. Oh, we got a mic. All right. It's working, correct? Muy bien. So welcome, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for being this afternoon with us here to learn a little bit about water justice and what we do, but most definitely thank you to the space and Professor Mendez for this opportunity to be here to share with you all. My name is Susana DeAnda. I'm the co-director and co-founder of Community Water Center. Our mission is to ensure that all Californians have access to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water. And how we create change is by being a catalyst for community-driven water solutions through organizing, advocacy, and education. We want to be a catalyst for community-driven water solutions. That's the key word, community-driven water solutions through core strategies, organizing, advocacy, and education. I'm a big believer, if you don't engage people affected by the problem, you're not going to create change or impact. So imagine a world where you have to buy or chug water to have safe drinking water. Well, Imagine a world where you have to move water for basic necessities, for washing your dishes or flushing your toilet. Imagine a world where you have to buy 5-gallon jugs of water just to have safe drinking water at home. Imagine a world where you have to do this, chug a little buckets because you can't have the heavy buckets because it's really heavy to chug into your house for basic necessities. That's Señora Magaña. Imagine a world where you have a 300-gallon tank outside your house for basic necessities, non-potable water. And then imagine a world where you have to bathe your child in a 5-gallon drum. That is the world I live in. That is the world that we live in today in California. Over 12,000 Californians today don't have safe drinking water. Actually, over 12,000 families don't have running water at all. But over 1 million Californians each year are exposed to illegal and unsafe levels of contaminants found in their drinking water. It is a reality that we can change. And what that means is, it is our hardworking families are having to pay twice for water. For a toxic water bill, because over 1 million people in California are exposed to illegal and unsafe levels of contaminants in their tap water. So they still have to pay a water bill. And then on top of that are having to go buy bottled water just to have safe drinking water in the house. So that adds up to 10% of their household income alone just to have safe drinking water. That is the families and people I work with on a daily basis. Quick question. These are 2 real samples. If you were thirsty, you went out for a run and you were thirsty and you came back, how many of you would drink the water? Well, actually, maybe you guys would know. How many of you would drink this water? Most of us wouldn't drink either of them. Looks can be very deceiving. These are live samples. I couldn't bring them. I couldn't fly with them, but we actually do have them. So what's dangerous is the vast majority of our drinking water in California have things like nitrates, arsenic, things that are linked to cancer and blue baby syndrome, things that we don't want to be drinking. And worse yet, they don't have a smell or a taste. So unless you know they're there, you're not going to drink them. However, unlike this one up here, the Duker water bottle, it actually smells like egg, and it looks like that. It's brown and stinky. That's secondary contaminants. It's manganese and sulfur. At least the Duker water bottle, if it were to come out like that from your tap, you wouldn't drink it because it's quite offensive. Unfortunately, the over 1 million people in California are actually exposed to the nitrate drinking water bottle. People need to be informed on their water quality. And looks can become very deceiving because the hard metals like arsenic and nitrates don't have a smell or a taste. So you really have to make sure you know what's in your drinking water. And if there's one thing you can learn from my presentation, I don't come here to tell you that the problem is an engineering problem or a science problem. It's a problem of having adequate information and resources in our communities to bring about change. And information. The drought. California is experiencing a 5th-year drought. The folks I work with are the best water conservationists. People are not going to waste water if they don't have to because they have to pay for that. However, the drought has only worsened the already horrible conditions that many families are having to live with. The drought has increased contamination, less rain, less dilution of our groundwater sources, increased concentration of contaminants. In many cases, because we managed to pass a very successful law 2 years ago, the Groundwater Management Act of 2014, which sets in California, now we have to manage groundwater, setting limits on how much we can pump out of our ground. We're like the last state in the country that doesn't have such a law. But when that was signed into law by Governor Brown, we saw a lot of water hoarding, a lot of over-pumping of our groundwater sources. So the vast majority of Californians in the valley rely on groundwater, over 90% actually. With the drought and with this law in effect, major over-pumping has happened. So shallow wells have become dry. So today I can tell you that we work directly with families that for 2 years have no running water. And you saw them. They were the folks at the beginning of the presentation. They have to have that tank outside of their house, non-potable water. They have to fill up buckets just to do basic necessities like flush a toilet and wash their dishes. It's a reality that no one needs to live like that. However, to this day in 2016, that's what we're working with. I'm here to tell you that the drought impacted residents and families are drought our climate-impacted residents, and we are at the forefront of climate change. It is very real. However, I come from a world where our local leadership doesn't believe in climate change, even with this happening right now. In Tulare County, where I have our office, our home-based office, 10 years ago, we discovered a very discriminatory policy in the general plan. General plans are these planning documents, how things grow. Under the liquid and waste element of the general plan, it actually had that 15 communities had no authentic future, and so therefore the county was not going to invest in public infrastructure, and therefore they should wither away for other opportunities. That is a very discriminatory policy. And the reason I share that with you here is because those policies that are set in the books were clearly implemented. And the reality of what we have here with the drought is only going to shift if policies and regulations are up to date with what we need now. I come from a region where people don't believe in climate change. So the reality is regulations are not going to follow that. We have no control of overpumping. Right now in Tulare County, with families having no running water for over 2 years, we still don't even have a groundwater ordinance control, meaning controlling the amount of permits given to wells, to drill new wells. They've allowed over 5,000 wells to go into effect just in Tulare County. The vast majority are not for domestic use, they're irrigation wells, which means they're going really deep into our aquifer, pumping a lot of water, causing major damage to our families and causing major subsidence. Once our land drops, we lose that storage and that capacity. It's serious. I'm a big believer that policy needs to truly be reflective of the need. Professor Mendez mentioned a very historic bill that we passed in California. I'm not very proud of it. The Human Right to Water, 685. We passed it. It was a great organizing tool because everyone can agree that everyone needs to have safe drinking water. However, it was really difficult to pass it. The industry fought the entire way. You would think that people would agree that even if no human being cannot live without safe drinking water, we still had resistance. Because where there's money and power, we always say water flows towards money and power, and that's very true where we come from. However, AB 685, the Human Right to Water, while it's very historic and the first one in the country, it's also very indicative of what we have in California. We have to set a law that says we need to prioritize resources to people that don't have safe drinking water. And I'm here to tell you, even though that was awesome and a great victory, and we built a movement behind that, we failed everyone. We still don't have that reality. It passed 3 years ago, and to this day, we don't have that. So we're in violation of the law. So even if we pass good policies, which that one was awesome, it doesn't mean that we're actually implementing them to be successful. So I'm here to tell you that if we want to change certain realities, policies have got to be reflective of the need, and implementation has got to come right with it. When you pass a law, you have to make sure you implement that. Now, there's traction behind that. However, the state of California has failed a lot of Californians for a long time for having lax regulation, are not controlling pollution into our groundwater sources. How many of you here know you're drinking water from your tap? Raise your hand. Excellent. And you know that by reading your CCR report? Those of you that didn't raise your hand, why is it that you don't know you're drinking water? I'm here to tell you it's super vital that we understand our drinking water quality from the tap and demand that that continues to be safe to drink and good information for us to make better decisions. Where I come from in California, a lot of people know not to drink the water, and they shouldn't drink the water. So therefore, they have to buy bottled water to have safe drinking water. But we all know there's less regulations on corporations around bottling water. However, that is the better alternative. It is really important that we truly understand that and really understand the basics of our drinking water. Everything has changed. The drought has changed everything. Our aquifers are not politicians. Groundwater flows wherever you're pumping it. Contamination will follow. So everything has changed. So I'm here to tell you that it's going to take the collective as institutions, students, mothers, organizers, nurses, papás y familias. It's going to take all of us to truly understand our drinking water sources, demand that basic right, understand that change is here, and climate change is very real. And climate justice communities like the ones I work with are at the front line, and we need all the support that we can get. And I would tell you here, any policy that we want to create has got to be bottom up. It's got to be rooted in our communities. to ensure that it's going to be adequate. Again, I believe that we can't continue to condemn future generations to live in a world where you can't drink water at school or at home. Many of our California schools are also not providing safe drinking water, which means a lot of students are having to see these laminated signs above their water fountains, not to drink the water because they have DBCP, arsenic, uranium, nitrates, and they're laminated. So it gives you a sense of permanency. It's not temporary. We can't live like that. That is not the world we need to live in. But that's the world we have in California, and change is coming. But I'm here to tell you that it's going to take the collective to work together to figure it out. It's not going to be, if we had the solution, I would have been done with my work. I've been working on water for 10 years. It takes the collective to think about things, to be strategic, and to ensure that we have adequate resources, timely resources for people that need it the most. The Central Valley in many ways has third world conditions, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And it's very clear to me, if you look like me and you're low income and you live in the valley, there's plenty of studies that show that you're gonna have higher chances of having polluted water and having to pay some high toxic water rates. That is not okay. That is not okay. And it's us who need to change the narrative, and we have the solutions, but it's gonna take the collective to really figure that out. So I'm here to share with you that, and I'm also here to tell you that I believe clean water is a basic human right, and it should not be a privilege. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions, feedback. Yeah. Oh, it's hot.
Michelle. There you go. Okay, my name's Michelle. I'm in the Masters of Environmental Management program. My question is about what you mentioned in terms of going from that policy to implementation. What do you see as the steps to make that a reality, and how does the community play into that?
Yes, good question. So the implementation is actually, I believe, the most important piece of passing a law. So it's making sure that everyone that's going to be key in implementing has the resources. So we passed the human right to water, yay, that's great. But now all agencies are saying, well, we don't have the resources to staff that. Well, we don't have what we need to do that. So part of the implementation is also part of the strategy when you're passing the bill. So it's making sure that state agencies have all that they need, the tools and the right people in office and staff. Listen, if you're in government, but then be government and truly understand the stakeholder process. Listen, people who I work with on a daily basis, I also shower in a community where we don't drink the water, and I should not be showering where I live. And my water is it's privately owned. As a water activist, I just know way too much. We have unregulated contaminants. So we have to ensure that whatever policy we pass is conducive to the times that we need and the resources to implement that. In addition to that, we have to also be thinking about the future, proactive. We're so reactive in the world of climate justice. We're reacting to things. Infrastructure is old and dilapidated. We are using, at least in California, I know that we spray all kinds of pesticides and herbicides to grow the food that we all enjoy. But yet, we don't even have the methods to look for them once they contaminate our groundwater. So we're not thinking ahead. We wait until people get sick, and then we realize, oh, we have a problem. So again, policy has to be also supported with resources and funding. Other questions, feedback?
Hi, I'm Emma Greenbaum, also Masters of Environmental Management. I've been working in North Carolina, where there's also really huge issues with water, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on ways to communicate with folks about the dangers of what's in their water in a way that's sensitive and doesn't scare people, but drives them to action. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about how to be sensitive when you're entering a community, and or people who are part of that community, and talking about that in a way that's not inflammatory but real.
Great question. And I actually met with some students earlier, and we were talking about that specific question. I think it's really important. See, adequate information is also making sure that you provide it in a sensitive manner. I'm one not to sugarcoat anything. I think it's really important that people truly understand information that affects them to make better decisions. Then it's up to them what they want to do. So take, for example, nitrates. nitrates are linked to the blue baby syndrome, kidney disease, cancer. When I have to go and door knock in the community to talk about that, it's not going to be easy. So we do it in a way that's sensitive. But I also believe once people know the reality of what they have, they're more inclined to figure out how to fix it. And that's exciting. So it's getting over the hump of that fear. Oh, I don't know if they're going to take it as they're going to freak out. I'd rather them freak out and get informed and make better decisions. So it's being sensitive. Consumer confidence reports, all these water quality reports, they're very technical. But once you get training, you know how to read them. You'll figure them out. However, if they're not given to us in a language that we can't understand, then it's a waste of our time. So we as activists are also making sure that regulations are passed so that put resources to ensure that these documents, these really important documents, are in a language that people understand. One. Two, we need to explain them in a way that people actually get it and really engage. So it's a matter of having one-on-ones. Where do nitrates come from? What the impact? And then most importantly, what you can do about it. It's very basic. If you pay a water bill, that water provider has got to give you safe drinking water. They're reliable to provide resources for your system. Now, where I live in, a lot of these low-income small communities only have 2 wells. And both wells, one of them either is not working and the other one's contaminated. So they're functioning with the system in violation constantly because we don't have the economies of scale. It is really expensive to bring in treatment for things like arsenic. If you only have a population of 500, then my mission is not going to be accomplished because my mission is to have safe, clean, and affordable drinking water. So to that, we're moving into a direction where we have to be thinking about consolidation, connecting systems, optimizing resources to bring about safe drinking water and affordability. But messaging is key, and I also believe you have to let people know, give them access to information so that they make the best decisions. Because if you don't, then other people will tell them what they need to believe. And if you don't give them good information, then you get things like shark filters. We have a ton of filters companies who are door knocking in the same places where we're working, trying to sell them these fancy filters that are water softeners. And if we don't do our good job of educating residents on what it is, what are nitrates, how do you make sure you get a certified filtration device, they're gonna get gypped, and someone's gonna sell them a bad filter. And every area is unique.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. That was a great overview of the amazing work that you do in the Central Valley of California, and I can see why you were awarded the award from the White House. So previously, we had a panel here on climate change, talking about climate equity, talking about how California is a leader on climate change, a global innovator. And your talk really focused about the Central Valley and the skepticism around climate change. Can you talk about what it is like to deal with this pressing issue in a land where there's a lot of doubt around and skepticism around climate change, and how do you work around that?
Oh boy. Well, I will be very honest, it's really hard. It's really hard to realize that this issue is really real. I mean, no water, bad water, people getting sick, high water rates. What more do you want to understand that things are changing? And that we need to control our resources and we need to use them appropriately. So I come from a world where I see the need and the impact, but our leadership, as you mentioned, don't believe that. So it's a really difficult challenge that I'm faced with. As mentioned, I'm on the Tulare County Water Commission, where it's been really difficult to even talk about climate change because people don't believe in that. But as an organizer, you just get creative. You call it something different, and you figure things out differently. I'm a big believer, if people put a door here, you open up another one, or you go around, you go under. There's ways to change it. And I'm also a big believer that once you give people access to good information, and people get informed, but most importantly, they get empowered to create change, nothing's gonna stop them. So it's just a matter of leadership changing. There's just so much you can educate people on. Some people are never gonna really understand the reality of others if they're not living in that situation. I mean, imagine you all living with no water for 2 years. That's hard. Imagine to have to buy bottled water to bathe your baby because you don't want them bathed in toxic water. That is not a life that no one needs to have. However, it is very clear who has access to good water and who doesn't. And leadership does not represent our needs where I work. Leadership is not conducive and is not reflective of what we need on the ground. As a woman of color, I can tell you that I understand what the community is faced with, but I also have a lot of things to learn. There's a lot of things to ask questions on. But the leadership that we currently have, where I come from, they don't want to ask questions. They want to ignore the others. And because we look different, they fear us. And fear causes hate, and no change happens. So it's a constant struggle and challenge. But I'm a big believer that you organize around the positive, around the light, and we're stronger that way. And we're able to pass bigger policies, like the human right to water, like Sigma, things that no one believed we would be able to. We were called extremists when I started working when we founded Community Water Center. Extremist. And now government agencies are working with us as partners. And that's a big shift in 10 years. And I think it's just a matter of building trust and having a relationship and really understanding that everyone has a role within the collective, within the movement to create change.
Quickly, can you talk a little bit about the organization, how it's structured? There's a Sacramento office, which deals with the Sacramento statewide policy, as well as what you do in the Central Valley and Visalia. Can you talk about the differences in the offices?
Sure. So I'm a co-founder, so my co-director is an attorney. We started in Visalia in Tulare County, out of my house. Then we slowly got money, and we opened up an office. We're a staff of 15 now. We also have an office in Sacramento, where our capital is at, to grow some roots and have a relationship. And that is where my co-director is based. But all of our campaigns have our strategies intertwined. So we organize, we advocate, and we push for policies at all levels. And we're a staff of 15, and we really are a team that, while we're pretty small, we're pretty powerful. However, we're powerful because we work with other folks. We work with people like Michael, with government agencies, and certain people that really want to believe, that really see their need in bringing resources to the collective. So our Sacramento office is not just focused on policy. However, they guide a lot of the conversation in Sacramento, but policy happens at all levels. As a matter of fact, local policy is way more important than state policy, because local policy affects you faster than state policy. Check us out on the website. It's a great team. It's a nonprofit that's been around for 10 years. And I'm a true believer that in order for us to create change is fixing the cracks and really working in partnership with allies and agencies to push together to ultimately have the safe drinking water for everyone. And so that everyone has this basic human right. It shouldn't matter where you live, where you go to school. You shouldn't have to worry about the water you drink from the tap. You shouldn't have to worry that you're going to get sick or anything, or not have to swallow the water you use to brush your teeth because you're going to get sick. And these are these constant stressors that people have to live with, and a lot of us take that for granted.
Thank you for your talk. Since you mentioned that there was a lawyer that was your co-founder, that provoked the question: how have you used litigation, or especially since the new law has been passed and signed by the governor?
Yes, it's a great question. I think attorneys are great tools. They're a toolbox in the organizing toolbox. So we've done some legal strategy around policy, not necessarily, but we've definitely have done some legal work around certain agencies not doing their job and requiring certain regulations to prevent further contamination of groundwater. And we've been very successful in that. However, I think legal strategies take a long time, take a lot of resources for a nonprofit, and it has to be used wisely. So we do use legal strategy, but it's definitely not the first thing that we do. But it definitely helps.
Thank you for your talk. My name is Kevin, and I'm a student here at the School of Forestry. I think, so going off of your comment about engaging stakeholders, I'm wondering, what are the other stakeholders that need to come to the table? You talked about governments, local governments, state governments at all levels. Obviously, you're part of civil society, NGOs. I think coming out of, one thing that came out of the UN Sustainable Development Goals was the call for the private sector to play a larger role, to be at the table. Do you see them as an actor that you can work with at the table, or is it just so against what you're working towards? And I think you're battling the privatization of water.
Great question. I would say, so it's all relevant to the setting and where we work with, right? So when I talk about stakeholders, I live in an area where it's big ag. So it's those that They're a big stakeholder they've always been at the table. And that's always been like that. The problem has been that we haven't been at the table, and impacted residents have never been at the table in planning decisions or resources, right? So that's been the problem. So part of our job is to be at the table and to encourage our community partners to also engage and be at the table. Now, I would say in the collective, again, everyone needs to be at the table, but the bigger it gets, the slower the process is, right? So a movement is as fast as the slowest person. And as an advocate, and I understand the urgency of what we need to get done, it's also, government likes to do a lot of planning processes, and that's great, but how much do we need to study the problem, right? We need to realize that sometimes we have to actually put things into action. So it's a combination of things. So certain stakeholder processes, we need them, and we're part of them, and everyone's at the table. So interesting enough, we were the ones that were missing to be at the table. So now we're there, along with everybody else. And that has changed dynamics, because now we have to have meetings bilingual, because they need to be at a time where people can actually attend, and they need to be talking to us in a way that we understand each other. And that has changed. So I actually think that the process for the government and stakeholder process has changed more for them, to be more conducive to residents that need to be engaged. I'm a big believer that if you're trying to change anything, you have to ensure that you allow people to be at the table that are affected by the problem, because more often than not, they know what they want and they can give solid recommendations. It's just a matter of offering that opportunity. In the private sector, they're more than welcome. They have their role as well. It just depends who it is. Oh, Todd.
I'm Brad Gentry. I'm on the faculty here. When you were thinking about the community-driven water solutions, you mentioned resources a number of times. Can you talk a little bit about how you all think about where the money might come from for those solutions? It sounds like you've got a couple of different possibilities. There's pollution, so maybe you can hold polluters liable, like my colleague was suggesting. There you mentioned water rates. Maybe there's a role for that, although that's difficult for many people in communities. And there may be tax funding that's out there. How are you thinking about where the money comes from?
So every year, all the above, and every year it varies on our strategies and our priority issues. So recently, Prop 1, we managed to secure over $500,000 of funding, and Prop 1 passed by all voters in California, just designated to low-income people of color. It's never happened before, and we were very aggressive. So now it's a matter of making sure that over $500,000 of the funding is actually implemented into the areas that we need it the most. So now it's all about implementation and making sure that agencies actually are using the money. That's one. Other things is making sure that we're providing resources for small-scale systems so that they're able to have the resources to think about connecting to other systems, to consolidate, so that they can share resources. Now, that might seem to you all a no-brainer, but it's not a no-brainer. We have a lot of systems that are running on 2 wells, and they're throughout the valley, that are not able to maintain that. And that is really difficult, and it's really unsustainable. So we need to figure out and bring in resources through legislation to make sure that we're able to provide that kind of resource so that these systems can consolidate and to figure out their long-term strategy as well, right? The drought has changed everything completely. And because we have major pumping of groundwater, it's changed everything even faster. So that's one. Other things is definitely thinking about a tax on fertilizer. That's crazy because it's going to be really aggressive, but we're thinking of that. And I think we have to be thinking of different funding mechanisms to bring about change. There's not just one way. We need all of the options. But again, none of that's going to happen if we don't have the right relationship with stakeholders, the right leadership. And that, I can tell you one thing, one of the biggest roadblocks that I feel in our work is leadership. The social infrastructure. We can bring all the resources to a community or to a county, but if leadership is not willing to change anything and to think outside the box and to leverage or tap into the resource, it's not going to happen. And so that is the biggest roadblock. Leadership not truly reflective of community needs. And that needs to change. People need to step out and get out of the way and let others step in for that. So it's a creative of different mechanisms. And obviously, the ratepayer, At the end of the day, everyone's paying a rate. So a lot of these systems are trying to figure out, when they have to increase rates. And it's becoming, that has been the norm. They've been increasing these rates so now they're really unaffordable. People are paying over $90 for water they cannot drink. And I'm talking hardworking farm worker familias that are not making a lot of money are paying some of the highest water rates for toxic water. That is unsustainable. And on top of that, we have aging infrastructure. So our entire system in California is just out of date. And we need to have new mechanisms through bonds, fees, taxes, and creative thinking. Yep. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your talk. My name's Minna, and I work in curriculum development here. And I was wondering about durability and how you work across kind of short-term news cycles and thinking about, where there's a class here this semester that's looking at Flint. And then I think, you have the drought that's obviously in the news a lot. So you have these kind of pinpoints where, we know that there's something going on, it comes up, maybe that energizes people in certain ways. And so I'm wondering about how you maybe think of harnessing news, the blip and turning that into something more long-term and durable in your work.
It's a great question. And as an organizer, I think that people will work with you if you have a short-term and long-term strategy. If our mission is going to take 10 years, it's going to take a long time to keep people engaged in that fight, right? So it's important that we have short-term strategies. So the drought has been a classic example of highlighting the drought and the impact, but it has also allowed us to amplify the message that it's actually worse that people have toxic water for over decades. The people that I work with right now that don't have running water for 2 years, part of me feels it's probably best because the water quality that they had is horrible. Right? Now, I'm not to say living without water is bad. However, so to your point, media strategies, we've used the drought to amplify the bigger problem and to really highlight the big problem, which is lack of good resources and good policies that are reflective of now. Everything's out of date. We have to be way more progressive and proactive of figuring out how do we become innovative on systems. How do we figure out how these systems can have the best technology and more affordable? It's clear to us that water is not forever. We have 2 sources of water, and we need to prioritize that. But I can tell you, with folks that we work with right now, we're connecting them to the bigger system, those that have no running water, so they're all private wells in East Porterville. So it's a community that they've all lost their water because they've all been on private wells, and we're working with the nearby system, which is a public water system, to connect them to that system. Because of the drought, we were able to bring in funding for that. However, we can use as an example of what big cities can do with their neighbors. But the reality is, a lot of the bigger systems don't want to take in the low-income communities of color. Oh no, that's going to become the ghetto side of the city. Oh, that's going to make us look bad. And that is very real. So when I talk about resources for consolidation and connecting systems, it's not that easy because the bigger systems don't want to do that with their neighboring cities. So again, it's a systemic issue that we have to change, and we have to think about the work now, tie it to long-term strategies always. Flint, Michigan, Texas, water issues are across the country and the world. But to me, as an organizer, what I really care about is impact where I work in, right? It's all local and it's all situational. So when I talk about long-term change, it's also keeping in mind that people don't have running water. But it's also keeping in mind that people have had no good water for a long time, and that it's not okay that our hardworking families are having to pay some of the highest water rates for toxic water. And worse yet, if they're not informed of good information, not to drink it, they're boiling their water. And we know if you boil water with nitrates and arsenic, it only increases the concentration. So it's a constant thing. And then on top of that, we have unregulated contaminants that are out there that we know are dangerous. So again, as water activists, some of us know way too much, but I'm a true believer that it takes the collective to bring about change. And everyone says, you have to be patient. Tell that to somebody that doesn't have good water. There's no room for patience. And our leadership needs to understand that we need leadership that truly can invest in good infrastructure, good resources and good management and good leadership that truly represents our needs of residents.
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm a PhD student here. Thanks so much for your talk. It seems like most of the or many of the people who are most affected by this water contamination are farm workers and agricultural laborers who might be employed by the very big businesses that are responsible for this contamination. Does that complicate their willingness to be involved in these programs, and how do you negotiate that delicacy?
Great question. It was a similar question to the one asked around messaging. Yes, I work with farm workers that work for the industry that pollutes the water, that they have to then use their salary to pay for high water rates. Yes, that's the reality. Call it what it is. My job is just to talk about the reality of how we can change that. You need to be a healthy farm worker, a healthy one. When you go home, you should not be exposed to toxic water. And your employer might be contributing to that. And we need to change that. So we have residents, and we work with residents that understand that are actually putting pressure on having better regulations so that their jefe, their boss, is truly doing something better. So it is complicated, but if you're honest and you're clear and you're transparent, people get it and people will do what's right. But when you're not honest and all you care is about greed and power, then you have an injustice. So most definitely, I work and organize residents that work for the same industry that pollutes. But that's why we have 3 strategies. You organize, you advocate, and you educate, all at the same time. Now, the industry has played different strategies on us too. They'll organize their own base that look like us, and they go and they'll say the opposite of what we say. And that's really hard. That is really hard because that's just wrong. It's wrong, and that's dirty tactics, and it's not okay. Great.
One more question.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about your role? You mentioned you're a community organizer, an advocate, and an educator, but can you also talk your role as a scientist, as a citizen scientist? You talked about unregulated type of contaminants, and recently the Community Water Center had a major statewide victory in terms of regulation or analysis of a new contaminant, TCP 123. If you could explain a little bit about that.
Sure.
On that and the process to get it finally regulated.
Sure. I'll try to do a quick one. So, regulation, it's all about regulating contaminants, and we have 2 major things that we have to keep track. An MCL, the maximum contaminant level, and the public health goal. And that's what it is for each contaminant in our drinking water. That's what we have to do. And then you monitor based on what contaminant ever so often, no? Take, for example, arsenic. Arsenic, the public health goal is 0.004 milligrams per liter. Really, really small. The legal limit is 10, right? People are not going to, you will not get notified of you will not get notified unless it's over the MCL. So by the time it's over the MCL, it's way over the public health goal because it's 10 versus 0.004. For the one that you're mentioning, this unregulated contaminant that we know is coming from Chevron and Shell, it's a fumigant, it's a carcinogen, it's vastly found in our drinking water. It has a public health goal. It's quite small, but it doesn't have a legal limit. And so because it doesn't have a legal limit, residents are not being notified that it's in their drinking water. As a matter of fact, public water systems don't even have to monitor for it. So systems don't have to monitor for anything unless they have an MCL for a contaminant. So part of our job is to ensure that the MCL is as close as possible for the public health goal for 123 TCP, this unregulated contaminant that you get exposed to drinking water or showering in it. So in my public, privately, it's a private water company that governs my system, we have 123 TCP. So I shower every day with this contaminant, knowing that it can give you cancer. That is a reality that we have. So it makes me even a stronger advocate to put a regulation in place. The State Water Board is moving in that direction to set a good, to set the MCL as close as possible to the public health goal. And just a quick question, who do you think is completely against having that? Dow and Shell, they have their biggest lobbyists to make sure that the MCL is as high as possible because they don't want to have all the liability. But the reality is it will be set. And at the end of the day, I truly believe that it's human power that can change things. And again, it's all about leadership. It's all about having good relationships with leaders. And we ourselves being a good leader, a good reflection of our community, and asking the right questions. So definitely get more information on that campaign on our website, communitywatercenter.org. We have 4 major campaigns and probably 4 in the coming year, where we'll talk more about financing, more regulations on controlling contamination, new contaminants, and then bringing about change for long-term strategies for our communities that don't have safe drinking water. Sure.
Thanks very much for your talk. My name is Lindsay, and I'm a Master of Environmental Management student here. I'm interested in what, if any, role big data and open data have on your work, and whether there are any scientific or data constraints that you think are significantly impacting your mission and your ability to discourse with the community you work with.
Great question. So we get to work with a couple of universities to help us fill in that gap. Because frankly, 10 years ago, that was the biggest gap, having access to good information, access to regular good data, water quality data. Today, we continue to lack a ton of information on private wells. We have a lot of residents that are on private wells, and if you're in a private well, guess what? It's completely your responsibility to monitor your well. If you're in a public water system, you pay a water bill, that provider needs to give you safe drinking water and water quality reports. But if you're in a private well, it's up to you. So we need to get more information on private wells. Now that's really tricky because it's very private data, but we need to have that to make better decisions, especially if you're pumping from the same aquifer. So I would say that's one of the biggest gaps of data, and there's probably more. So we would love to talk after. Great, well, thank you.